question about how Maharaj Parikshit received that message. So first, as I mentioned, I want to read the middle section of this purport from text 6, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Starting with a sage. The sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu or great sage, not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Shukadev Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. So today we're actually going to talk about sadhu sangha. Srila Rupa Goswami, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, gives us these 9 steps. It's these gradual stages, actually, that one goes through when trying to develop love of Godhead. Just a little bit of background for Srila Rupa Goswami and the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, for those who may not be familiar. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna himself, in the with the mood of a devotee, the mood of Srimati Radharani. He instructed his disciples in various different ways, or his followers. So, for example, and it was very specific to the devotee and their nature, their inclination, their qualities, right? And so some devotees he would instruct, you should stay married, and others he would say, no, you take the renounced order of life. It was different for different people. There was an entire village of devotees who he entrusted the service of bringing silk ropes every year to Jagannath Rath Yatra. See, when Lord Jagannath is transported from the temple in Jagannath Puri to the Rath carts, it's actually this big process, because the deities in Puri are gigantic, and the Lord of the universe is naturally quite heavy. You can't pick him up. So the pujaris there, they have to do it in like these stages. You don't just pick up Lord Jagannath and carry him out to the cart. There's a whole lot of brahmanas, and they have all these silk ropes, and they're bound around Lord Jagannath, and they pick him up and then take a few steps and then put him right back down. They have these little asanas, these little pillows, and they put him down, and the Lord is so heavy that often these pillows split open, and the filling is sort of flying about, and then the brahmanas take a breath, they get their strength back, and they pick him up again. They move him to the next asana, the next pillow, and again. So anyway, these silk ropes, since the Lord of the universe is quite heavy, these silk ropes tend to wear out, break. So Lord Chaitanya entrusted this village, that village is actually known for making silk, strong silk. And so he entrusted this whole village of devotees that every year you come and you bring these silk ropes to Lord Jagannath. And some devotees, like for example, Lord Chaitanya, he saw that one of his devotees wasn't very good with financial matters. And he saw another devotee was. So he said, okay, you take care of his financial matters. You're in charge of that. So he engaged his devotees in a very specific way, according to their qualities, right? So Lord Chaitanya, when he met a pair of brothers, we know them as Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. When he met these brothers, he understood that they had special qualifications. So his instruction to them was to go to Vrindavan, reestablish the holy places there, and to write transcendental literature for the Vaishnavas. Now, specifically, well, little background there too. Sorry. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, in their younger days, they served under the Muslim ruler in the area that they were living in. And so they were considered by most to be outcasts. Even though they were born Brahmanas, they took a position to serve under Muslim rule. So they were considered outcasts. And when they met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they understood, okay, this is, here's our Lord and we're going to serve him. So Rupa Goswami was able to leave his government post in a relatively easier fashion than his brother Sanatana Goswami. He was able to retire, and he took the money that he earned, and he famously and exemplarily, I don't know if that's a word, the editor can tell me if that is, I'm sure it's not, but anyway, you all know what I mean. In a very exemplary way, he divided his money off. He gave 50% to the brahmanas, the devotees, 25% went to the needs of his family members, and 25% went into savings, which then later helped free his brother from prison. We'll get to that in a moment. Anyway, so Rupa Goswami then, he left his position, and then he went off on his way to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sanatana Goswami, he could not retire from his government service so easily because he was one of the Muslim leader's closest associates. And so at first he just sort of played hooky. He called in sick from work. Instead of going and meeting with the Muslim ruler, he said, no, I'm not feeling well and it's probably contagious. I shouldn't come in. And instead, he invited a whole lot of brahmanas over, and he was having them recite Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's what he was doing with his time. So when the Muslim ruler found out about this, he became perturbed. And so he came by and saw that Sanatana Goswami, in fact, was not sick, that he was playing hooky. And since they were so close, they had such a close relationship that he didn't kill him. He just put him in prison, right? He put him in prison for insubordination, for not following his duty. So Sanatana Goswami, with the money that Srila Rupa Goswami put aside, was able to bribe his way out of prison. And then he had to take a different. So Rupa Goswami and their brother Anupama, who's the father of Jiva Goswami. So we've just talked about 3 of the 6 Goswamis now. They went off before, and then Sanatana Goswami, when he was released from jail, he had to take a different road because he couldn't take the main public road because he may be recognized and maybe put back in prison. So he's very cautiously coming through. So Rupa Goswami met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Prayag, and Anupama was also there, the brother. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Srila Rupa Goswami and pretty much gave him the exact subject matter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, right? And he instructed him, okay, you write this literature about devotional service, the process of devotional service, and then also go to Vrindavan and reestablish the holy places. Sanatana Goswami, since he was going on a different path and he was being very cautious, he ended up meeting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Benares, Varanasi, Kashi, a lot of names for this place. Anyway, Mayavadi Central, this is where it was. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would visit there sometimes. This was during the time where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he took 6 years to go on pilgrimage after taking sannyas. He traveled to South India, he traveled to North, everywhere, West. And so while he was traveling, he met the brothers and instructed them. So while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Varanasi, he spent his time with Chandrasekhara Vaidya, not to be confused with Chandrasekhara Acharya from Navadvip, and Tapan Mishra, who was the father of Raghunath Bhatti Goswami. So now we talked about 4 of the 6 Goswamis, just in talking about these literatures. So when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met with Sanatana Goswami in Varanasi, the Lord instructed him on Vaishnava etiquette and things like that. And he instructed Sanatana Goswami to compile what is now known as Hari Bhakti Vilas, standard for Vaishnava etiquette. So these books, this is just a background of where these books come from and how they're authorized, because we've talked about Srimad Bhagavatam, and we know how that's authorized, and we're still actually talking about that now, where it's come from. And so sometimes early on we hear all these names getting thrown about and names of books, and we don't necessarily make all these connections. So I just wanted to give that little background for you there. So anyway, very authorized book. And it talks about these stages that one goes through in the devotional process when trying to attain love of Godhead. So it begins with Shraddha, which is faith. And then the next stage is Sadhu Sangha. So it's Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, and etc. It goes up like that. Sadhu Sangha, of course, we understand it means associating with devotees. And by the way, in this process, when we go through these stages, it's not like you go through the Shraddha stage and then Shraddha, faith, is no longer important, and then you're in the Sadhu Sangha stage. It's as you go through each one, the previous ones all increase. So first, it's just Shraddha. You have faith, one part faith, right? And then the next stage, Sadhu Sangha, you have 2 parts faith and 1 part Sadhu Sangha, right? And then you start the process, Bhajana Kriya. So then it's 3 parts faith, 2 parts Sadhu Sangha, and 1 part Bhajana Kriya. And then it keeps going on like that until you're at Prema. You have 9 parts faith, 8 parts Sadhu Sangha, 7 parts Bhajana Kriya, etc. Like that. And so this is it's a process. It's a gradual process. And as we go through, each of the previous stages increase. So I've spoken about faith many times and how faith isn't just a theoretical thing. It has to be an active thing. We have to be willing to step out of our comfort zone in order to show that we actually have faith. It's not just a theoretical thing. It's something that we have to actively do. So Sadhu Sangha, it's another one of those things that we think we know what it means, but oftentimes we don't. We've misdefined it. We don't understand what it means. But today, in today's verse, it gives us a hint of what Sadhu Sangha actually is. So I've noticed, and even in the translation, it's called association with devotees. Even in the English, the word association means a connection. The word connection is implied there in that word. And what it means is that if that connection isn't made, and this specific connection in Sadhu Sangha, it's that, so we're connecting with the sadhus because the sadhus connect us to Krishna. And so there should be a relationship, a connection between us and the sadhus that cultivates that connection with Krishna. And if that connection isn't made through this association, through this interaction with the devotees, if we are not becoming more and more attached to Krishna through this interaction, then that's actually not association. That's just conversation or hanging out. So proximity does not equate with association. Just being near other devotees does not mean that we're associating with devotees. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen it a lot, especially in America. I travel around a lot and I go through different sanghas, and I hang out with a lot of different devotees. And I've seen that in a lot of cases, there are devotees and they consider, hanging out with other devotees at like the latest pop-up vegan restaurant and, talking about politics or whatever. They consider that sadhu sangha because they're with devotees, right? And they're like, oh man, it's so nice to be with devotees. And it is nice to be around devotees, but if we're not actually talking about Krishna, if we're not developing that connection, then it's not sadhu sangha. It's nice that we're around other devotees, sure. And we may be reminded of Krishna because, there's that connection, there's a slight connection there. But if the true connection isn't being made, then we're not taking full advantage, I'll put it that way, of the sadhu sangha. It's still good to hang out with devotees, but we don't want to squander it by by not taking advantage of what it truly means. So especially the one line I wanted to read again is if one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. And so hearing the words, not seeing, but hearing the words of the sadhu, that's where the true profit comes in with sadhu sangha. And that's an important thing that we have to understand and take advantage of. And this is something that, like I said, I've seen that many of us, including myself, since we don't exactly understand what sadhu sangha means, we don't know how to take full advantage of it. I mentioned last week that that this process, it's like following a recipe, right? And so sometimes we see this very complicated recipe and we don't have some of the ingredients. Some of the terminology in there is like, it blows up. We don't even know what it means. I don't even know what that means. So how can I do that? And so when we find these recipes, it's, we can wing it. We can be like, all right, well, we don't have some of the ingredients, but we're going to try it anyway. Right. And then obviously it's not going to turn out right. That's just the nature of recipes. And it's the same thing with devotional service. If we don't understand it, we don't understand something. If we don't have some of the prerequisites, then it's not going to turn out the way we expect it to. So the process of sadhana bhakti, by the way, some people refer to this process, sadhana bhakti, as a fake it till you make it process, which is a very inaccurate description of sadhana bhakti. Fake it till you make it means, you pretend you have it until you have it, and that's actually not what sadhana bhakti is. Sadhana bhakti means, you may not know how the thing works. So educate yourself. It's not fake it till you make it. It's educate yourself until you understand it so you can make it, right? And so, some people, some other sanghas see this as an unnatural thing that, you should just spontaneously be attracted to Krishna. And of course, that's the goal, spontaneous attraction to Krishna. That's what we're going for. But until we have attachment for Krishna, and while we have attachment for other things, we have to engage in a process, because we know in theory that we should be living our life in a certain way. So we start engaging in a process, and this is the lower stages of these 9 that we're talking about. And you begin a process so that you can then go from theoretically appreciating the concept of loving God to actually having a taste for it, becoming steady with it, having a taste, and then developing attachment for it. And after that attachment then there's an affection that develops. And this is actually a natural thing. It's not a fake it till you make it thing. I mean, some people can follow the process like that if we're not paying attention. But the purpose of sadhana bhakti is to understand the process so that we can follow through and then make that advancement. And so this is why sadhu sangha is very important. So the shraddha is there. We understand that Krishna is God. We understand that we're not. We understand that there's a relationship there. But we have to find out from the sadhus, the ones who have been where they are where we want to be. They've gone through the obstacles that we're currently going through. And so we want to find out from them, how do I understand this? How do I get this? What are these ingredients? I've never heard of them. And what is this process, right? So this is where the sadhu sangha comes in. We can't expect the process of bhakti to give us prema if we try to skip steps or if we don't understand what they are, right? And so sadhu sangha, super important, and we have to understand what it is. We have to understand that it's hearing from the sadhus and then making that connection to Krishna through them. Very important. One thing I want to share, and sometimes I'm actually embarrassed to share this because, it involves a material attachment that I had, but it happens. So I've explained to people in this forum how I used to be a race car driver, and how I used that attachment to understand how to be more mindful of my japa, my meditation. And so there's another. This is a more recent attachment that I've had in the it's still back a couple of years ago, but it's still recent enough that I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it. But there was a game that I used to play on this device that I have here. Sometimes I'm the kind of person that I like to exercise my brain, my mind, and so I like to do like puzzles, Rubik's cubes, or anything that exercises the mind, to exercise the logic, because it's a muscle and we need to use it. Now, ideally, I should just be doing these things and exercising these things directly with Krishna-ized things. But anyway, somehow I got fairly addicted to this game that I found online. And there isn't much a connection to devotees, devotional service, anything like that. But somehow I got attached to it, and I'm playing this game. And in this game, there are what are called alliances, right? And these are different people that you connect with, you become allies with. And in the game, you can't proceed with several aspects of the game unless you are part of an alliance. That's just how this particular game works. If you're doing it on your own, you can reach some goals, but you can't reach all of the goals. So it's within your best interest to join an alliance. And I have this ongoing joke that when you're a kid, sometimes there's you get a report card, and sometimes there's little comments written in the report card, and one of the comments is doesn't play well with others, right? Or inattentive in class. But anyway, doesn't play well with others. So I've found in my own life that oftentimes I don't play well with others. A lot of times I'm better off alone, right? And so what my attachment to this particular game taught me about devotional service is that if we don't take advantage of sadhu sangha, there are aspects of bhakti that we will not have access to. And that's just plain and simple. And this is only the second stage, sadhu sangha. So if we're trying to skip over that one, if we're trying to overstep that, we're not going to get very far. And we shouldn't be surprised that we've been engaged in this process for a long time, and we don't have a whole lot to show for it. We have some, but there's no attachment yet, right? Certainly no bhava, right? So anyway, somehow Krishna showed me through my attachment to this game years ago that devotees are absolutely important. That you can't bypass that. We can think, well, I already have my connection with my spiritual master, and I have the books, and I don't. No, but Krishna loves his devotees, and he loves when they get along. And it's in our best interest anyway, because the sadhus, the devotees, like I said, they've been where we are, and they are where we're trying to get to. And so just like last week, we quoted Bhagavad Gita 4:34, that the spiritual master can impart knowledge unto you because he's seen the truth. And so it's in our best interest to inquire from him, because we're trying to get somewhere that he already is, right? And so it's the same with the sadhus. They are also spiritual masters. They are our shiksha gurus. And so not only are they necessary for our advancement in spiritual life, but we have to understand that, like I was mentioning before, we have to understand what actual association means. That connection, that relationship has to be there. Now, of course, there will be certain types of devotees that we will gel with in a better way. Like-minded devotees generally want to come together, and that's natural. It's not that it's not that right away we will have to learn to appreciate every single devotee. We should, just the fact that someone has decided to dedicate their lives to propagating the holy name of the Lord. That should be enough for us, honestly, but due to our material conditioning, we see others' material conditioning that we don't agree with, and we tend to judge. But we see that, for in Anartha Nivritti, for example, which is after we've begun the process, then we have to start trying to get rid of our unwanted habits. Well, the most dangerous anartha is Vaishnava aparad. It's not taking advantage of sadhu sangha. And this is a hard lesson to learn. But it's not that we have to, like I said, appreciate and accept every single devotee, but we have to respect them. We have to respect that they made that decision, and we have to respect that they are on the path. And just as we have our imperfections, they may have their imperfections, and we may really dislike their particular imperfections, but it doesn't disqualify them. So at least we have respect for all Vaishnavas, and then we find Vaishnavas who are like-minded to us, and we cultivate devotional service together. We make that connection. We hear from them. We play off of each other's strengths. We learn from each other's weaknesses. The people that have been around for a while, they've learned from their mistakes, so you don't have to, and that's something that we should learn to take full advantage of. It's within our best interest. Dronacharya Prabhu was mentioning last week in the discussion after the class that he gave the example of Sachinanda Maharaj. He used to give this japa retreat, and devotees who have been chanting since the 60s even, they come and they start realizing this is how we're meant to chant japa. They're finally getting that deep realization and that mood of chanting, of asking Krishna for service, and then for accepting that service and performing. And so the reaction is naturally that we should tell these young guys right off the bat, because we didn't have this. We didn't know it. Now we finally know. And so the natural inclination is to try to let these young kids know right off the bat, hey, by the way, I know what you're doing right now because I've been doing it for 40 years. Trust me, do it this way. Do it this way. And some of the people just aren't ready to hear that, right? So we can't get frustrated with that, but at the same time, we have to take full advantage of it. And then we also have to understand for ourselves that there's probably other things we're not doing right. We weren't chanting japa right, in the right mood, in the right state, in the right consciousness. We weren't making that connection. So maybe we weren't doing a whole lot of other things right too. Association with devotees, the process of devotional service itself, anartha nivritti. Maybe we weren't doing that properly either. Maybe we don't have a complete conception of faith. Maybe we just think, okay, I say I believe it, and that's all I have to do. I don't have to do anymore. I sit back and wait to go back to Godhead. If that's our conception of faith, then it's going to take us a really, 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 really long time to go back to Godhead, because we have to get the rest of the realizations there. And so, yes, it's in our best interest to understand what sadhu sangha is and take full advantage of it. So, just in closing, I want to drive home 3 points today. The first point is proximity does not equate with association. Just because we're near someone or we're with someone doesn't mean that we're associating with them. It doesn't mean that connection is made or that relationship is established. So that's the first thing. The second thing is association means connection. So we connect with the sadhus so that we can connect with Krishna. This is what sadhu sangha means. It's a connection. We connect with the sadhus so that we can connect with Krishna. And then the third thing I want to drive home, and this is just a quote from the purport again: if one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Right? So we have to understand this. And last week there was a doozy too in Srila Prabhupada's purport about hearing Bhagavatam. If the speaker and the hearer have ulterior motives, they're materially motivated, then it's useless. hearing and reading, chanting, hearing, all of those can be useless if the connection's not there, if the proper consciousness isn't there. So again, all of these things, super important to understand. Sadhu Sangha, what it means, the connection to connect to Krishna. And then we have to take full advantage of that. And we have to understand the necessity of it. We can't skip it over. And it's very, very, very important. Trust me. Okay, so we'll stop here and we'll see if there are any questions, comments, discussions.
I have a question, but I don't know how to raise my hand.
Oh, well, that's fine. Tathvavit Prabhu, please accept my obeisances and please ask your question.
You spoke about the 9 stages, and you said that the first stage, when it's followed by the second stage, it doubles, and when it's followed by the third stage, the first stage triples, and so on. I've never heard that, so I'm wondering where you read that.
So, okay, maybe it doesn't exactly double, triple, and increases is basically what it is. I've heard it in the seminar at the Mayapur Gurukul, and it also makes sense. So faith is always increasing. It's not that we so in other words, we have faith, right? We have faith that there's a possibility that this process may be legitimate. Then we hear from the sadhus. After we hear from the sadhus, our faith increases a little bit more, right? Because if it doesn't, then we're not going to start it, right? We're not going to go to the bhajana kriya part. So it's increased. So then we start it. And as we're starting it, we're starting to see then that we have unwanted habits. They're starting to be evident to us because people act in specific ways for reasons. They don't think anything is wrong with what they're doing, right? They may think, all right, there are a few things that, maybe I should, try to get away from or quit habits. But for the most part, they're satisfied with their lives. But, when we start the process of devotional service, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, it shows us that there are unwanted things in our lives and it's in our best interest to get rid of them. So the faith increases again there, and then we start trying to get rid of these unwanted things. As we start getting rid of these unwanted things and we see that our life is improving, then the faith becomes even stronger yet. It's like, when someone's giving you directions to a place that you've never been before, they're telling you about landmarks. As you start seeing all the different landmarks that the person is telling you about, you're more and more confident that the directions are actually going to lead you to where you're going. You see these confirmations of your progress. And so it increases like that. So that's faith. And then the sadhu sangha also will increase because you have more faith in the sadhus and the process and the weeding out of unwanted things. And so naturally all of these things increase as the process goes on. So it's not like a ladder, like, we do this, okay, now next stage, now we do this. Did that answer? I know the question was just, where did I hear it from? And I answered that, but does that also make sense that that's how the process works? I wish I had a more scriptural authority for you. I know it's there, I just don't know it offhand. But did that?
There's a scripture or reference?
There is, but I don't know it. But I can look that up.
How do you know there is one?
When we went through that at the Mayapur Gurukul, the reference was given. I just don't know it.
Okay. Thanks for your answer. That was helpful.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Is there anything else? Or did you want to add anything on the topic of sadhu sangha?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Chair Prabhu. I don't see any other hands raised, but I wanted to thank you for bringing up the point of, distinguishing sadhu sangha from, just general socialization among, people that are devoted, that are kind of classify themselves as Vaishnavas or pursuing the Vaishnava path. And because I guess it's always kind of been there, but I see it more and more. I guess when you just become observant with it about, just kind of like more of a casual practice or casual association. And I guess there's always that need of having that to some degree, but the desire to really want to associate with people to learn, to go further, to study. And I guess the two just can't be synonymous, I guess, as long as, and one has to be more prominent. I guess is the danger, I'm trying to frame it in a question, like is the danger when, I guess, kind of the casual association becomes more prominent, or they become synonymous, where a person says, yeah, I have devotee association because, they went to the vegetarian restaurant with somebody, or they, went to the beach with a devotee as opposed to a non-devotee, or went to a movie with a devotee as opposed to a non-devotee. I don't know, maybe could you just mention something a little bit on that further?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's an important, it's an important thing to understand, because if we don't understand it, and if we, again, just, become proximal with devotees, we will make some advancement. Like I said, we're at least appreciating the fact that these are better people to hang out with for our process in devotional service than non-devotees. So there's something there, but it's going to be really, really slow. If we don't make this connection, then, as Srila Prabhupada mentions, there's no profit. If we're not prepared to hear the words and then to also follow the words and make the change with our life. As with everything in our process, it all comes down to the consciousness. It's not the activity, it's not the thing, it's not any of it, but the consciousness. And that determines whether something is material or spiritual. If our consciousness is how does this thing serve me? How does it serve my senses? Then it's material, no matter what we're doing. And the consciousness, if we are doing this because we know that this is what Krishna wants, or we're doing it because we're doing it as a service for his pleasure, in that consciousness, then that is spiritual, no matter what we're doing, whatever it may be. And so it's the same with, being with, so by the way, I want to make sure that I'm not confusing people and saying that you shouldn't go to a vegetarian restaurant with devotees. That's okay. It may not be the ideal place to hang out, but it's certainly okay. But the connection should be there, right? While you're there at that vegetarian restaurant, talk about Krishna, talk about the process of devotional service.
You have to offer the food to Krishna if you go to a vegetarian restaurant.
And of course, there's that, because otherwise that connection's not there, because we're not vegetarians, right? As Tattva Prabhu's pointing out, we're Krishnaites. We don't eat anything that's not offered to Krishna. So we're just vegetarian by circumstance, right? Because you can't offer any of those other things to Krishna. Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out, because that's another thing that I've seen. Devotees, we become sometimes, or aspiring devotees, sometimes we become too distracted in the detail. And I talk about this a lot, details over principles. We become too distracted in the details and we don't understand the principle. We can actually not even be following the process. So, we're going to a restaurant or a grocery store and we're busy like looking at the ingredients just to make sure that it's an edible thing. And maybe we even forget to do the offering because we're like, oh, finally, I found something that I could eat. Even we're looking and we're like, oh, it doesn't have onions or garlic. Perfect. Well, why would you look at that? Because if it does, you can't offer it to Krishna. So it's like, but then we forget, right? Or I see often, well, I've seen many times, devotees will go, they'll like get ice cream or something, and you got to eat it quick before it melts, I guess. But there's like the mode of passion offering. the Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. I even saw at one point, and I'll just talk about the circumstance. I saw one time a fellow aspiring devotee. He pulled a blackberry off of the vine, and as he's throwing it in his mouth, he says, "Hare Krishna!" Like it was in his mouth by the time he said Krishna. He was like, "Hare Krishna," and that was the offering, right? And honestly, if his consciousness was proper, that was an offering. But if I did that, it wouldn't be an offering. That would be me trying to, eat as quickly as possible, and do the minimal effort to connect that with Krishna. So again, like I said, it's the consciousness and not the activity. So, it's possible somebody could quickly do an offering like that and be in a mode of trance and actually, see Krishna there, it's possible. But the important thing to understand is it's not the detail, it's the principle. We have to understand what's all going on there. And if we're overlooking those things, or if we're distracted by those details, and we're not being with other Vaishnavas, that's a detail. What are you doing with those other Vaishnavas? Are you hearing them? Is what they're saying actually connected with Krishna? And then are you hearing that in connection to Krishna? Right. So that's all very important. That's all what we do. Did that satisfy what you were asking, Dronacharya Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you for the elaboration and answering that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's super important. Looks like we have another hand.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your very nice class.
Thank you.
And the example about the video game, about alliances, is helpful in remembering that we should associate with devotees. Then we can progress easily. So this comparison, this is very helpful. I find it helpful. Remember it, that we should associate with devotees to progress easily and quickly, because I tend to do things on my own actually. So it's helpful. Thank you.
I can relate. Well, I'm glad that you can also learn from my mistake, because I certainly learned from my mistake. And it was taking a lot of my time when I was playing this game. But as soon as I realized that was the message that I was receiving from this game, that alliances are important, that devotee association is important, then I was able to give it up. It was no longer an attachment. That was the thing that I had to learn from that. And that's what the process of devotional service is all about. We have attachments, and like I said, sometimes they're embarrassing, and sometimes we're ashamed to talk about them. But they're there for a reason. We're attached to these things for a reason. We're not attached to Krishna directly. We're attached to something. And so the process is to figure out how that attachment is actually just an appreciation for Krishna, because it is, everything's him. We just have to see how it is. So yes, I was playing that game, and finally when I realized the thing that I liked about it was that people were working together to meet a common goal, and that's what I liked about it. But that's what I'm already doing in the process of devotional service. So I don't need the game anymore. I'm doing it in real life. We're working together to meet a common goal. We're helping each other. And that's what Sadhu Sangha is all about. So I'm glad that my addiction has helped somebody else. Not just,
It's helpful. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
It was very good, Prabhu. All these examples you gave, it's very useful to all of us, especially for me. And whatever your practical thing, I think I can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinjavali.
Thank you.
You're very kind.
Thank you very much for the nice class.
Thank you. Anything else?
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other hands. George Chandra Prabhu, always it's a real treat, and we're very fortunate to be able to have you join us. I know it's a little bit of an austerity for you. You're out in Kentucky off the grid, and you make a special arrangement to come and speak to us every Tuesdays. So we really appreciate it. I hope you feel that, because it's genuine. To all the devotees, thank you for coming out and listening. Daily hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. I hope you're feeling that your consciousness is becoming purified. Your attachment to Krishna is becoming deeper. We're coming up on Krishna Janmashtami, less than a week away. It's next Monday, and Srila Prabhupada's 125th Vyasa Puja is coming up on next Tuesday. So as we approach, this is kind of like a holy week. We can really increase our concentration and focus on Krishna, reading a little bit more, doing a little bit more service. The temple needs a lot of help in preparation for Janmashtami. We have a big cleanup day on Saturday morning. As many of you that can come out, that would be great. But in general, this is a time to really try to immerse yourself in Krishna consciousness. There's a lot of potency there. So consider that as you move through your day and throughout this week. Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful Krishna conscious day. Vanchakalpatarubhishcha
Kripasindhubheva cha patitanam Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hari Hari.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you.